I didn't get a chance to, or we're not even going to talk about the town halls last night, but based on the numbers, things are not looking good for President Trump. But the real question now, as we turn to what's going to happen after the fact, is it going to come down to just numbers? Is Trump going to just lose this thing on election night? Is this going to be a bunch of Trump supporters going to come out of nowhere and push him over the top? And is he going to leave the White House? Is he going to threaten any type of action? Is he going to have his supporters not accept the results of the election? I've seen some very interesting posts lately on social media, my own personal social media, not like Twitter or anything. I've seen people posting about food rationing, getting ready for a second wave, of course. And then I've seen people posting about preparing themselves for with growing food and, weapons training and things like that. And it is quite alarming. Now, personally, I've actually told my mother to take to the rural areas for the day of the election, just to be safe. But we have an article here from Politico. It's an opinion piece. This is what I was reading, and I saw MSNBC actually cite this, which kind of prompted the video. So let's get into this. It does reference actual data, of course, but there's going to be a little bit of a hiccup in it a little bit further down the line that I find extremely interesting. So this is from Politico. This is dated October 1st, okay? And it was updated on October 9th, which is key. So it says, like a growing number of prominent American leaders and scholars, we are increasingly anxious that this country is headed towards the worst post-election crisis in a century and a half. Our biggest concern is that a disputed presidential election, especially if there are close contests in a few swing states, or if one candidate denounces the legitimacy of the process, could generate violence and bloodshed. Scary words here again, and this is actually going to cite numbers. So what they actually have is, where do they say what it is? There's a couple of polls that they looked at. All of us separately have been involved in surveying and researching American political attitudes and engagement. Late last year, we noticed an uptick in the number of respondents saying they would condone violence by their own political party, and we decided to combine our data sets to get as much information as possible on this worrisome trend. We are also monitoring another question: would you condone violence if the other party's candidate wins the presidential election? Good morning. So the first bullet point, among Americans who identify as Democrat or Republican, 1 in 3 now believe that violence could be justified to advance their political party's political goals, a substantial increase over the last 3 years. Number 2, in September, 44% of Republicans and 41% of Democrats said there would be at least a little justification for violence if the other party's nominee wins the election. These figures are both up from June, when 35% of Republicans and 37% of Democrats expressed the same sentiment. Why do I delete my videos? I don't delete my videos. I just take them down and I will be editing them. I'm just like super busy right now, but I promise you, if there's a specific segment you want, let me know what it is, because I'm actually going to try to go through today and cut out multiple segments from the last stream. So you let me know what you're looking for and I'll see if I can get it up. I definitely want to get the Hunter Biden piece up, so that one will probably come up today. Similarly, 36% of Republicans and 33% of Democrats said it's at least a little justified for their side to use violence in advancing political goals, up from 30% of both Republicans and Democrats in June. This is kind of crazy, right? Vaughn says, as much as violence and revolution is talked about, nothing will really happen. That is why we're doing this story today. I'm always the guy who's the pragmatic, and I'm like, hey, don't get too hyped up. People aren't really getting too crazy. But I think that we have to remember, you don't need a lot of people to create chaos. Okay. And again, I've been having conversations with people offline, and some of these conversations I've been having are alarming, not because they're just the level of preparation in these people's voices, the level of conviction, for various reasons. It's not all just because of election things, but just a lot of things happening at the same time kind of creates this powder keg. And it does concern me, because I think the election itself could be that big moment. Now, I think this is going to be civil war, everyone in the streets for months. No, that's not going to happen. The National Guard will show up. Everyone's going in the house. But could there be like a couple of hours of unrest? Oh yeah, for sure. There will absolutely be a couple of hours of people being upset. Could there be a small group of people who do a lot of damage? Yeah, there could be a lot of those people or there could be a small group of people who do a lot of damage. But no, it will not be what Tim Pool's talking about. It's not Tim Pool level, but yeah, there could be a little bit of you could have basically a Ferguson in your backyard. You know what I mean? Like you could, if you live in those types of areas, you live in those big cities, you could have a couple of hundred people in the streets blocking traffic or, maybe throwing some bottles or some type of conflict with the police. There's even been an increase in the share of both Democrats and Republicans who believe there's either a lot or a great deal of justification for violence if their party were to lose in November. The share of Republicans seeing substantial justification for violence if their side loses jumped from 15% in June 20% in September, while the share of Democrats jumped from 16% to 19%. Now, these numbers are even higher among the most ideological partisans of Democrats who are identifying as very liberal. 26% said there will be a great deal of justification for violence if their candidate loses the presidency, compared to 7% of those identifying as simply liberal. Of Republicans who identify as very conservative, 16% they believe there could be a great deal for justification for violence if the GOP candidate loses, compared to 7% of those identifying as simply conservative. This means that the ideological extremes of each party are 2 to 4 times more apt to see violence as justified than their party's mainstream numbers. Now, again, that's what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about large groups of people. We're talking about a few people who are extremely motivated, like the group that tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, like, some of these protesters. It could be a little bit crazy, right? You should tag the one with Hunter Biden. Should PlayStation make Hunter Biden into a GTA character? Yeah, I got to get on my clickbait game. You're probably right. I probably should do that. But I've noticed there's been some interesting conversations about Hunter Biden and his after school activities. So now here's the interesting thing, right? There's an update. It's not quite a retraction, but it is an update, which is pretty significant. And this is why you got to watch the media. So between the censorship that we have going on social media, which is going to be in that Hunter Biden video if you didn't see it, the censorship of social media companies and their involvement in saying we're not going to let this story be posted because we think it's not legit or it's an unverified source, so we're not going to run that story, which is crazy. Because them having that power allows them to contribute to Americans' feelings and get those people who are really, really motivated out into the streets. That is really what the problem is, right? If you haven't seen, we should just do a review of The Social Dilemma. If you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, I'm sure that I know there's a video out that pretty much sums it up, but basically, in the film, they talk about how these social media companies kind of create a vacuum for you, and they feed you down this tunnel of whatever narrative they think will keep you on the platform the longest, which can ultimately control the narrative that you see, to create a situation where your narrative is just different than the people around you, and 3, it can really kind of incite you to become more extremist in your views. So that is a kind of crazy power for a social media platform to have. But it can be problematic in situations like this. Suspended reality. Yeah, for sure. Politically driven violence is a farce. I don't know if I would say that. I don't know if it's a farce. I mean, I think the media will definitely make it seem like more people than are truly politically motivated are going to be involved. But I don't think it's necessarily politics. I think it's just, people's lives, whether it be people who are looking at the issues of, the Black Lives Matter movement, or they feel like there's violence coming from the police, or there's people who are upset about stimulus talks lagging, or there are people who truly are upset that they feel like their democracy is being stolen because one candidate or one party is using, mail-in voting to try to steal the election. if all these things are happening at the same time, it doesn't really matter why it's happening. All I know is there's people in my backyard with fire bombs and guns. Like that's the problem. I don't really care what you out there for. So racial and economical violence and revolution is real. Yeah. So, swing for the ring. What's up, my guy? Do you want people to know just how vulnerable the system is? I think people are starting to figure it out. So here's the update, right? Because this is the most important thing. The update, I guess, is what's dated for October 9th. Since this article was published, we've received new polling data that strongly suggests the trend is not as large as originally thought. On the question of justifying violence, new data from the same source as the 2017 on the question of justifying violence in the event of losing a presidential race, there has been a small increase, but not as large as the one we originally described. We're reviewing the new data and will update further. Are y'all for real? Like, for real? Listen, you're going to have to learn to think for yourself. I promise you, okay? You got to learn to think for yourself, because these people out here, the ones who get to control the narrative, who get to tell you that you don't get to see certain content or you can't read that story because they haven't vetted it, are the same people who will publish something like this and then say, oh, by the way, we told you those numbers were significant. Turns out they really weren't. My bad. Several days later. This is not going to get the light that the original story did. Now, the original story, I saw it was quoted on some MSNBC thing. I was scrolling through my timeline yesterday and they mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of crazy that they're even mentioning that, because I figured they wouldn't really want to, talk about something like violence. So it was mentioned casually. So I'm like, oh, I got to read this story now. So I track this thing down, and then I see this big retraction at the very bottom. And it's like, wow. So basically the whole story, which you probably should take down. You should probably take down all of the top part and just put the bottom part. But I guess you get to leave it up and keep the headline too, which is, you can't trust these people, man. You just cannot trust them. So let's see what their final verdict is, right? Let's see what their final verdict is. Altogether, about 1 in 5 Americans with a strong political affiliation says they're quite willing to endorse violence if the other party wins the presidency. The surveys by YouGov and the Voter Study Group had margins of error ranging from 1.5 to 3%. The surveys by Nationscape had margins of error of 2 and 2.1 percentage points. How seriously should we take these expressions of violence? Both history and social psychology warn us to take them very seriously. In Europe in the 20s and 30s, a rising tide of armed street mobilization and violence clashes between rival partisans ravaged fragile democratic cultures, bullied and marginalized moderate forces, and gave rising autocrats an excuse to seize emergency powers. Some of us who studied the rise of authoritarians see strong parallels between that period of European history and the factors at work in America today. What? Okay. Oh, hold on. Let me see something. Can I change that? So, who here listens to Kim Iverson? I listen to Kim Iverson. She doesn't make many videos, but she's cool. She gets really in depth. I do appreciate that. She talks a lot about foreign policy. A lot of interesting narrative coming from her way. She definitely has her own lane. She's doing good work though. But yeah, in summation, really. Should you be prepared? I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now. I'd be somewhat prepared. Like I said, I wouldn't go full bunker, but if you consider that just a few months ago, there was no toilet paper on the shelves and Walmart was like just completely empty, that we are undergoing significant change as far as, the economic situation, the pandemic and how that's changing the way we live, and then we have a very contentious election. I'd be a little bit prepared. I could get some extra food over the next couple of weeks. You got what, 2.5, 3 weeks before the election? I'd grab a little bit extra food. I'd have a fallout place, a little plan just in case things get crazy. It just kind of depends on where you live. But yeah, I think people are going to be upset. Right? Liberals will cry again if Trump wins. I don't know if Trump's going to win anymore. I think Trump's probably going to lose. But the problem now isn't if Trump wins or loses. The problem now is how Trump responds to him winning or losing. Is he going to say, let's take it to the courts? Is he going to say these election results are fake? Or is he going to say, have an early lead in the day and then declare victory? And then when the Democrats come back in a few days, say they're trying to steal the election. Any one of those scenarios could be problematic. Even this article talks about, many Americans are now clear that there's going to be a lag in the election results and when they expect to know who the true president is. But the question is, how do people feel about the first reporting? And we know that Trump is the guy who's going to come out. And if he can declare victory early, he's definitely going to do it. He's declared victory over the pandemic. He's out here talking about there was some story, I don't know how true it was, some story leaked about him wanting to come out with a Superman shirt on after getting out of the hospital. He's getting up there talking about how he wants to kiss all the men in the audience. He's going to kiss all the women because he feels so strong now. And it's just like, would this guy come out here and say that he won the election at 6:00? Yeah, he would definitely come out and say he won the election. So we're going to see. You gave up on Kim Iverson when she said Karen is a racial discriminated group. I will agree when she Karens are a racially discriminated group. I have to look that up. I didn't know that Kim Iverson was involved in that. Now that's intriguing. I don't know. Let me know what the title of that video was. I'll see if I can dig something up on that. But yeah, that's what we got so far. I just wanted to put this out there. Like I said, I don't want to go full Tim Pool. I'm not going to give you daily Civil War updates quite yet, but I will tell you, I would just keep it in the back of your mind over the next few weeks that, no, there's probably not a large amount of these people who are willing to do this. Obviously, the rich people who are controlling everything, they're not going to be out in the streets. And people who have something to lose, they're not going to be out in the streets. But there is this fringe group. I mean, if this group represents 0.5%, I mean, if we're talking about 38 people in your hometown who decide they have a problem with these election results, that's enough to cause a real problem. How many people were involved in the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer? Like 20? You don't need a lot of people to cause big problems. I would just do my best to try to steer clear of those individuals and just, hang close to the house for a couple of days around the election, just in case. So I'm about to hop off of here. I appreciate you guys for coming through. I definitely have more segments coming today. So yeah. And also stay tuned. Hopefully I'll be able to get that Hunter Biden video up by the end of the day. So I'll be back.